Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular scheduled Tabor Town Council meeting for April 11th, 2022. And we'll call the meeting to order. We have no public hearing today. Adoption of the agenda. Ask for adoption of the agenda as presented, please. Councilor Brown.
I can move the adoption of the agenda as presented.
Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes. Item 4.1, minutes of regular meeting of council March 28th, 2022. Mr. Tebow.
Just have the regular meeting minutes from March 28th for council's consideration.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make that motion? Councilor Rudd.
The council adopts the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on March 28th, 2022 as presented.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 5, business arising. There are none. Item 5.1, proposed downtown sidewalk and streetlight improvement. Mr. Tebow.
Mr. Gary Scherer will give us an explanation. This is the, I think the second time this has been back in front of council based on a request from Councilor Beckering last time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Scherer.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, members of council. As requested, we brought this back. We had another look at it. And council kind of leaned towards not having cement in the bulb outs. And really, I agree, the pavings don't look good. They have good decorative features. So we came back with better pricing, as you can see. The cost for normal concrete is $356,000. Colored is $378,000. And this is just in front of the businesses, as we discussed. And there's a map on there to show the locations, things like that. So we're just basically looking for an alternative for council rather than the paving stone. Is this something you would prefer? And then we'll get into the street lighting.
All right, thank you. Any questions in that regard? Councilor Sorensen.
Hi, Mr. Chair. I just noticed, and it's kind of also in the agenda for 7.5, there's a mention of the 2023 Canadian Building Fund. I was just wondering if that could be accessed for these type of projects also.
So yes, we'll get there. That has to do with revitalization downtown. If we just look at sidewalks, that's maintenance. So, but if we look at more street lighting, with more decor, more enhancement to the downtown core, then we could apply for the revitalization grant. So that's what we're looking at.
All right, thank you. Any other questions arising? All right, do you want to carry on to the next step?
So we are asked to look at street lighting downtown too. There is enough lighting according to ICF standards. It's very close. You have 250 watt light bulbs, which is huge for a downtown area. The next size up is 400 watt, which is highway lighting, and I don't think you want that downtown. The only alternative would be to go to the decorative lighting, which you would have more locations, and it would be a lot brighter and it'd be more focused down on the area, on the road area and walked area. As we discussed, this would probably be a great enhancement for the revitalization grant. So administration was asked that if council would like to move forward with that, we can combine the two. Then rather than maintenance, we have more of a revitalization to the downtown core.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Councilor Rudd?
Yeah, so is there grant money available for that period?
Yes.
Okay.
As you can see, from the 7.5 or whatever it is, there is money. Yes.
Okay.
But the thing is, it's nice now that we've narrowed it down to $600,000-700,000 project rather than the 1.3 it was. So it's less expensive. They would look at this more of an opportunity rather than a large project.
All right, thank you. Councilor Sorensen.
I just don't see the grant portion of it then. Because you're asking us to approve certain numbers.
You don't have to approve a motion for this grant.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's not on there. But I mean, feel free to add it and direct administration to apply for grants for the funding for the project if you would choose to. But it's not required under this funding. So one of the things, if you look at the street lights, we gave two options on street lighting. You could pick one or the other. Our choice would be to go with 325,000, because then you can always reduce it in the future if you choose to.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor McLean?
When you do the removal and disposal of the paving stones for the street, I was wondering, so it costs to dispose of said paving stones. Can you offer them to town people for free?
So normally what we do with paving stones and in concrete, we would, especially the paving stones, we would keep the good ones in
Yeah.
case we had to replace a few here and there.
Right, I see.
Then the ones that are damaged, we move them to a recycling concrete area
Okay.
where we grind them up to use as sub-base in underneath our roads.
Oh, okay, I didn't know. Okay,
Yep.
awesome, that's good to know. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bruin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through Gary Shear. The lights we have now on the ball belts that exist, are they included in being changed, or are we keeping those?
No, those would be staying.
Because they're just a straight up. with
They're
the
just
ball on
candlestick,
top.
yes.
And so the decorative ones you're proposing is the first one here?
Yes, it's up to council, but yes. Like I said, you could always, once we get the grant, we can come back and ensure that that's the ones you really want.
Okay, no, that looks good. And there's a spot we're considering banners and that to hang?
That's in the next one, yes.
Okay. And the other follow-ups, I suppose, with the concrete, you're suggesting then going with just straight concrete?
Well, straight
brush?
normal concrete, it's durable. The water services come in from the front on 48th Avenue. If we ever had to cut colored concrete, we wouldn't be able to match it as well. You'll still see it with normal, but it will not be as noticeable. Colored concrete, because it's faded from the sun, it'll stand out. There's no doubt about that if we had to make any service repairs.
Yeah, I'd support that as well.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, so in this case, we're looking for two separate motions, Mr. Tebow?
That is, yeah.
Yes,
Two separate
Chair.
motions? Okay, all right, so let's deal with the cement and paving stones first. Councillor Bruin?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion that council directs administration to add the downtown sidewalk replacement project to the 2024 capital budget at a cost of $356,000 and directs administration to use normal concrete, fiber reinforced as a replacement for the paving stone walkways in front of the businesses on 48th Avenue, locations as shown on the sidewalk replacement drawing.
All right, thank you, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried now, and the lighting motion requirements.
So we would recommend alternative number 3.
All right, so I'm prepared to make that motion. Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council directs administration to add the downtown street lighting replacement project to the 2024 capital budget at a cost of $325,000 and directs administration to use pendant fixture structure number 1475.
All right, thank you, motion on the table. Councillor Shortland?
I just wonder where we need to add in the motion that they apply for the grant funding.
With this grant, no motion is needed from council,
Okay.
but you can feel free to add one in if you choose to. That's up to council.
Would you mind adding that as a friendly amendment?
I would accept that friendly amendment, yes.
All right.
So, Your Worship, if we do it for one, would we do it for the first one then too? Because you have two separate motions?
You're looking for that to be,
Is the concrete, because it's maintenance, is that
Yeah.
applicable?
No, we would apply it under one grant. So, but we have two motions just for the streetlights and
Yeah.
for the sidewalks.
okay, so we have,
That first
we have a
motion's
motion in
already
place
passed.
already for the
Yeah.
first one. So to do that would have to be a council.
Like I
initiative.
said, it's not
Yeah.
required,
Okay,
so it's up to council.
that would be a council initiative if we're going to add that to the motion that has now just passed related to the sidewalk cement material, or we leave it as such and or go with what's on the table.
It sounds to me like administration is going to explore that grant option either way, so I think
Okay,
that
all right,
just leave
thank
it.
you. Councilor Groom?
I already agree with Councillor Firth. I made the
Okay.
motion, but I think it's fine.
All right, we do have a motion on the table, friendly amended motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Great, thank you. All right, on to item 5.2, follow-up to Taber and District Housing Foundation requests. Mr. Tebow.
I believe Mr. Orwa is going to come and speak to this. Again, we've had this in front of council before, and this is administration's follow-up.
All right, thank you, Mr. Orwa.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, His Worship and members of council.
Good afternoon.
Before you is a follow-up to the Taber and District Housing Foundation request for financial assistance. Now, before I open it up for discussion, I would like to draw your attention to two motions that's going to drive the next discussion. The first one is the motion from the town of Taber that gave us the opportunity to look at suitable cost sharing solution for the affordable apartment. And then the second one, at that point, I think the MD had not met. So on the 22nd, the MD of Taber Council held their meeting, and that is the motion that came up. But the only thing I would like to point on that motion before, that motion that they had, if you look at the last sentence before the numbers, it says up to a maximum of 1.025 million contingent on the following general conditions. So those conditions are very important to them, and I feel it will also be very important to the town of Taber. Now, then the next one that I would like to point out is because our motion from the town of Taber indicated that we include Taber District Housing, there are a few things on that table. If you go, this one came from TD, and you can see they had those two options. But if you look at those two options, the total cost on the first one is 10.1, the other one is 11.2. But if you add the numbers down there, they don't add up. So they don't tally. I'm not very sure where the other fraction of the amount missing is coming from. So that's something that we'll also need to talk to them about. Because if you look at the first column on option 1, if you add 2.5 plus 4.61, 0.44, plus 2.05, you don't get 10.1. So they're missing about 490,000 there. So I'm not very sure where that funding is coming from.
Sorry, Mr. Orwa, 490,000?
490,000. And if you look at the other side, if you add 2.8, 3.74 up to the end, you get about, I think it's about 10.68. So they're missing about 520,000 in the second option. So those are things we can clean up with them when we meet them. But for now, I'll open discussion for council whether they would like to move forward with the debenture.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Councilor Beckering.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Orwa, is the town of Taber able to afford a debenture since it cuts into our borrowing limits?
That's a very tough question to answer. I would only just give you exactly where we are standing with our debt limit. Now, as I said, by around this time, because we are having our financial statements audit coming on Wednesday, I think if we add all that have been requested so far, we'll be heading towards over 17 million in debt. So that means it cuts down the servicing limit. So we just need to be cognizant of that as we take our decisions. But so far, with whatever we have, we're approaching close to 18 million in debt.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Brown.
You say we're approaching 17 million. Does that include this here?
No.
That does not include this. And could you go back to the second motion there you're concerned about with from the MD?
Scroll down.
Upload it. What was there that concerned you, John?
So it's not a concern, but I wanted to draw council attention. When the way they structured that motion, they will go forward contingent to the following general conditions. Number one, if Taber decides to go through. Then the second part, only if you go to number 2, just same number 2, yeah, right there. That TDH obtains the requisite funding from CMHC, Government of Alberta, Town of Taber, and then FCM. So in other words, they were trying to tie their part with those two.
which seems to me to be wise. Now, out of that 1.0525 million, that our land donation of 0.44 million, is that part of our contribution?
So if you go back to the table, if you scroll back to the table. Right there, sorry, right there. See, the town of Taber has already offered land already, which is 0.44. So in addition, they would want 1.025 million.
Okay, so that's part of, so it's 0.44 plus 1.25 million.
Correct.
So we're not really getting the credit for donating that land.
No, with this, no, because the debenture required is 2.05, and that's what we are dividing by 2. So in addition to the land that the town has offered.
Just to Mr. Tebow, I guess the question would come up, Mr. Jansen indicated how the 440 came in is actually a 550, I think was the actual worth of that lot. And he indicated it's about the 20% that they were indicated somewhere that they were not entitled to. So I'm not quite sure where that's ever come out, number one. And number two, if that's in fact accurate, that they would only be using 80% of that lot.
The discussion that I recall is that Mr. Jansen suggested that that value was based on a percentage of the lot being used, just as you had mentioned. I don't know what that percentage was. Sounds like about maybe 75% of it or something.
I'm just doing that math, that's what it would work out to roughly, but I'm just not sure where that ever came out for one, and or if that's accurate with the size of the facility, if that would only require 80% of that particular lot.
Right, and as discussed before, I'm not certain what we would do with the other
Right,
percentage of land. I don't know that it's going to be of
Yeah.
any use to anybody else.
all right, thank you. Does anybody else recall that, how that came about? Counselor Firth, you do?
Yeah, that was, I previously sat on the Taber District Housing Board, and that's correct. In the designs, the preliminary designs that we saw, there was a separate building that the architect drew in, but there there's never a plan for that. And I'm not sure exactly what the percentage was, but it wasn't going to take up, this building that they're trying to fund right now was not going to take up the whole lot, no.
I see, so we have roughly 20% of extra land here for whatever use. Counselor Beckering?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've been discussing this particular topic for many times, or already a couple of years, I would think. And Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion.
All right,
I'll move that the town of Taber support that Taber and District Housing Foundation Cherry and Main Affordable Apartment Project by initiating a debenture on Taber District Housing Foundation behalf up to a maximum of $1,025,000, contingent on the following general conditions: that the MD of Taber debenture accepts and passes a similar motion of 1.025 million on behalf of the TDF Foundation in support of this Cherry Main project. And number two, that Taber District Housing obtains the requisite funding from CMHC, the Government of Alberta, Town of MD of Taber, and FCM as outlined in both proposals.
all right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Great, thank you. All right, just to cover all the bases, Mr. Tebow, that's covered everything we're required in this regard, other than the shortfall Mr. Orwell was missing.
I believe the conditions that were mentioned does cover,
That would.
yes.
Okay.
This will allow them to at least start down the road of paperwork, and it is just contingent. If any of those don't come through, then we're not obligated.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, on to item 5.3, Clarisholm Immigration Initiative. Mr. Tebow.
We'll get Mr. Chris Egan to come up and present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and
Good
Council.
afternoon.
This particular motion arose out of the March 14th council meeting, where we were asked, administration was asked to investigate and report back on the town of Clarisholm immigration program. That program in Claresholm, they were one of 11 communities. It was a federal program, and very successful from their perspective. They recruited, over the 2-year period, 25 new workers that resulted in a total of 80 new people, the workers and their families, coming to Claresholm. The current Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, AEIP, which has 2 streams, the entrepreneurial stream and then the worker stream, has been initiated by the government of Alberta. And this particular motion provides a couple of options that you can direct to administration.
All right, thank you. Any questions at this stage? Councillor Sorensen?
Hello. So I'd like to just comment that we participated in not only a South Curro Economic Development Conference, but also I attended the Kananaskis Alberta Economic Development Conference also. And labor shortage is a huge problem nationwide. So I can applaud the Alberta government for coming up with these 2 programs to help assist communities in trying to attract and retain labor. And I would approve this program moving forward.
All right, thank you. And I just to clarify, I guess there was an additional ask, Mr. Tebow and I had this conversation previous about a couple of business owners that approached us about this new one that's out, and this is very similar or one and the same?
It's very similar, so
Okay,
it's not the same program.
Yep.
The federal government still has primary responsibility for immigration in Canada.
Right.
But now this new AEIP program inserts the municipal government, us, in the actual program for nominating and clearing immigrant workers for local businesses.
All right, thank you. Councillor Rudd?
Yeah, a couple of things. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we know the numbers of what kind of numbers we would need here to bring the labor force up to what's required? And a secondary question would be, because I noticed that in the Claresholm experience, they had to hire staff to manage the program, and I wondered if we had looked into partnering with adult education, Taber District Adult Education, because they're running similar newcomer support programs and such, and wonder if there's any leveraging that can be done there.
So to answer your first question, we don't have an accurate picture of the total labor requirement for the town. We've met with a single business owner who themselves needs 30 workers to be fully open. So as Councillor Sorensen mentioned, it's not just a few people, likely throughout the community.
Yeah, just to confirm that the 2 businesses that were interested in the newest one here is, I believe, are short 8 to 10 personnel per business. So roughly 20 staff shortage numbers they're dealing with right now. And so they're extremely interested in that regard.
To answer your second question, so the program requires a committee of participants, and that's where we would see the town not take the lead role. We have an important role in approving particular individuals in that stream of requirements, how we get to actually recruiting people, immigrants from overseas. But the community associations, both for housing, for training, for making them feel welcome, there's a fairly substantial effort that will be required to make the program successful, which is to recruit and retain immigrant workers in the community.
All right.
So we would look to convene that committee. We don't know what it looks like yet, but that's part of the investigation that we have to carry on with, I guess.
All right, thank you. Councillor Becken?
I was just going to say they would certainly make great partners in that committee.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Becken?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really, thank you for your presentation, sir. I really think this is a worthwhile initiative. I think the more partners we can acquire, the better it is. I strongly urge administration also, if we were to continue this initiative, to contact the Municipal District of Taber administration and partner up with them, because they are also in the same predicament as some of the businesses are in Taber.
bet.
So I think if we can get more involvement from more entities, I think it would be very beneficial. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions already? Sounds like they're both good programs for potential possibilities. Councillor Sorensen?
So I would ask if you need more time to prepare for this, or if we could actually make a motion to actually fill out the application
For
form.
the designated community, I believe one of the options is to go, council can direct us to go forward with making the application to the provincial government for to become a designated community, which would be the first step in that process.
Sir, just to clarify, would that cover both of these initiatives then? If that was the case? Okay, just to confirm, yeah,
Yeah,
I think so, but
when so there's two streams. We would be applying for the immigrant worker stream
right, yeah,
rather than the entrepreneurial stream, which is for potential business owners to come in. We can
Okay.
make that application too in the future, but
Right.
that's a substantially different stream of process.
okay,
So we do have, to go back to Councillor Rudd, your question, we do have in that we believe it will take probably another person in the economic development group. Clara's Home experience was they had one, and by the end of the program in 2 years, they had 4. But we don't think they were doing more than strictly this particular program. So that's our best estimate at this point, is an additional person.
all right, thank you, Councillor Rudd.
Yeah, so was ClareZone then involved in both streams, the entrepreneurial stream and the worker stream?
No, that federal program only dealt with workers in themselves, so not the entrepreneurial stream.
So what we're talking about here tonight does not include entrepreneurial.
Correct.
All right, thank you, Councillor Brooke.
Can it?
Sure.
Okay,
We're happy to do whatever council wants us to do.
Councillor Brooke?
That's, I think actually the recommendation here would probably be wise, instead of jumping into it, to get a little more information about who else could be involved and which other organizations. So I could proceed forward with a motion, Mr. Chair, that council directs administration to further investigate the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program and report back.
All right, thank you, Councillor Sorensen.
Yeah, I was just gonna talk on the rural entrepreneurial stream, that it would just be a separate motion, because it's a separate application.
Okay, so, all right, so we're required 2 motions out anyway, I believe, regarding these 2 initiatives, right, Mr. Tebow?
You could put, 2 motions would probably be cleaner for administration
Yeah,
from
right.
time frame perspective, so it could all be in one, but 2 would be
Okay.
preferred.
All right, we do have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Councillor Sorensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to also make a motion that administration proceed, or investigates, perhaps, with the application to apply for the rural entrepreneurial stream.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And Mr. Egan, just wonder if you wouldn't mind just speaking to the young lady that is in the back of the room from our Dairy Queen business, just to kind of give her, she's expecting to talk to you related to some of this information, how this plays out at this stage. Perfect, thank you. All right, on to, sorry. No, sorry, no. Sorry, I meant just if you just talk to Mr. Egan in private, yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. All right, on to item 5.4, KMMSC Campground Picnic Tables. Mr. Tebow?
Mr. Brian Martin will come up and speak to this.
All right, thank you. Good
There
afternoon.
was- Afternoon, Mayor and Councils. There was a motion to investigate bringing picnic tables into the Ken McDonald Campground. We found that there was the above, as stated in there, $5,000 for the wooden tables, and if we were to match the ones that were in Trout Pond, we're looking at about $38,000 for that option. and that's about it.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Any
Looking
questions?
for
or anything?
council's decision on what your opinion is on that.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bruin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The tables we have at the spray park and in the Confederation Park, they're a plastic cement bottom kind of piped into the ground. Have we considered them at all? Like, why go solid cement when perhaps it'd be cheaper to go that way?
Administration's recommendation would be the wooden ones, just because out at Ken McDonald, we will have to move them often because of cutting, because they're not actual planned sites. They're not gravel sites or anything like that. So to cut the lawn and to water it, we would have to move the picnic tables. So the wooden ones would be better. They would stand up to barbecues and things, people putting hot things on them. So the concrete's a little harder to move without redeveloping the sites.
And they burn well.
Yeah.
Great for barbecues. No, I would suggest the wooden ones as well, just because we can replace a lot of wooden tables for the price of the cement ones.
This is true, yes.
All right, thank you. Councillor First?
I noticed that there is a note about having to move them. How much extra time is that going to add to the maintenance out there, having to move these tables back and forth for mowing and irrigation? Is it going to be a giant pain?
I don't think it's that big of a deal. They would just be moving them, 8 feet one way, 8 feet the other as they're driving through with their lawnmowers. So it's not a huge deal, no.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions arising? All right, someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Sorensen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make a motion that council directs administration to purchase 16 wooden tables to not to exceed the amount of $5,000 to come from the operating or cap. Oh, I have to select one. Where's Mr. Orwa to help me with the decision? Mr. Tebow, could you help me with that?
Either or reserve is fine. There's money in both. I already checked with Mr. Orwa, so operating reserves would be fine to come from there.
To come from the operating reserves, please.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Great, thank you. And on to item 5.5, portable toilets cost extension. Mr. Tebow?
Looks like Brian knows what he's doing, so we'll let him carry on.
Yes, it was requested by Councillor McLean to investigate extending the season of the portable toilets into the fall and maybe a little longer in some of the play parks we have. Included is the pricing that we pay currently, and we're looking at each, I think to extend even just with one, we're looking at about $200 per play park per toilet to extend the season per month.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Bruin?
Do we have any idea how many more portable toilets we'll require?
It would just be an extension of some. Oh, pardon me, sorry. Okay. Yeah, it would be an extension of some of the areas that we already have. I think there might be a couple that don't get them because they're the smaller parks.
I was just wondering, like, what's the additional cost then to do this?
Right, yeah. All right, I guess we'll just clarify with Councilor McLean, that was your initial does that cover the base that you were asking originally? Okay.
I don't see here, like, how much additional money we're required.
All right, Mr. Tebow?
It was being left up to council to make that decision, so it's basically $200 times however many toilets you'd like in whichever locations. So we would do the math thereafter, but that's part of the alternative, was to have that discussion around
Right.
which ones in which locations for what duration of time.
All right, Councillor Rudd?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It just seems that in reading the documentation here, that there was, effort made to determine where they go, how long they stay there, and that's based on, I don't know, traffic or volumes or however you do that. And just wondering how accurate is that? Is that really reliable? Do they come out and then there's a giant hue and cry that the season is over? I mean, with the weather around here, September can be our July and vice versa. So that I can see why extending it, but by my calculation, it's $200 a unit times 14 if we stay with the contract, and it's an additional $2,800 to extend it for the month, depending whether the contractor can meet that or not. So, but I guess firstly, are we convinced that we need to do this from the service levels that are provided, and any feedback that we get on those service levels that it's not meeting expectation?
Administration's opinion is that it's probably sufficient for now. Some of the parks, obviously Trout Pond, it's not going to get the same traffic in the winter as it would in the summer. So those washrooms aren't being, we do close them down. And then some of the other parks, they close completely. Ken McDonald's closed after the football season. So there would be very minimal usage of them, and the possibility of damage through vandalism and stuff increases too, and we have to pay extra fees for that too.
All right, I'll just sort of put you on the spot, Councillor McLean, but just to clarify, I want to make sure we got your bases covered with what your ask was. And so the current setup is suitable all the way around? All right, thank you. So in this case, there's no motion required, Mr. Tebow?
Correct. If we do nothing, that program stays as is.
All right, well, thank you for your efforts on this as well. And, all right, appreciate that very much. Moving on to item 5.6, swim lesson registration, Mr. Tebow.
Again, we'll let Brian speak to that. Our ladies have put everything in a proper order.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so it was directed to make swimming lessons more available, the online registration of them. It was the 8 places that we've advertised them or listed on the documents. And when the registration had opened, we pretty much filled up fairly quickly. It really went fast. So as it mentions there, we had 26 out of our 34 classes were filled within the morning of being open. There has been a few slots, but most of the people that registered did do it online. So.
All right, thank you, Councillor McLean.
Sorry, I just had to clarify. When I had made this motion, I had asked for the schedule of the swim lessons to be more available for the public so I did my own little investigating, and I realized that the town website isn't very friendly for mobile devices. And so when you go and you search the Town of Taber Aquafun Center, it takes you to the town website. And then when you click on that and it brings up the town's website, it shows you the swim schedule, but on your phone, you can't see the lesson schedule. But if you go to a tablet or you go to specifically a desktop computer, right underneath the swim schedule, there's the month or the year or whatever. And in that link, it shows the swim lesson schedule kind of thing. But I was just the one time I was shoot, for instance, this coming weekend, there's probably no swim lessons because it's Easter weekend kind of thing. But I just remember last season, there was one time I was like, oh, dang it, I need to look up, because you register for your swim lessons and then sometimes you just don't keep the paper or whatever, right? And so then I just wanted to quickly look up the swim lesson schedule, but because I just had my phone, it's really just the way it's set up. I don't know why, but on phones it's not really compatible. So that was the only thing really.
Okay.
It's I know that the swim lesson schedule or registration is done really well, and I have no qualms with registration at all. I think it's done quite well and everything, but I was just wondering if we could even just have like a couple of tabs maybe or something at the town website, like swim lesson schedule, swim schedule, cost, or whatever, you know what I mean? Just so that it's like easily seen.
Yeah,
That's
so
all. Because
our,
it's hard on your phone. And I understand
Yeah.
making it compatible with devices is hard, but
So the way the IT department has laid it out is, our website page is like an overlay with, Jordan's gonna lose his mind on me now, but we take, another program that's sort of based inside of our website, so it's sort of running inside of it, and that's where the schedules lie. It's not really within our jurisdiction, like our actual control. See, he's got his headphones off and everything. He's gonna just throw them at me. But yeah, that it's sort of like that's how it works. We're using a separate scheduling program that merges them together. So it's not completely easy.
Yeah.
If that answers anything.
All right, thank you. Counselor Firth?
Thanks. I just wanted to comment that item number 8, how the system emails out to everybody that's already registered the dates and times that lessons are starting. I thought that was it's a really effective way of communicating that to all of the users in the system. So thanks for that.
Oh, thanks.
All right, thank you. Counselor Sorensen?
I was just gonna ask, other than the website, if the information's on Facebook or somewhere, but then Councillor Firth just pointed out it's emailed to you.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's sent to you
Okay.
numerous times.
All right, thank you. Counselor Begrin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor McLean, were you driving while you were on the phone?
No, I
Oh, boy. Okay. Well, thank you so much for all your efforts and your presentation that way as well, Brian. All right. And again, no motion required in that regard. We've got that covered, I believe. Correct? Okay. All right, moving on to R&O bylaws. Action items number 7.1, Operator of the Year Award. So if I could just ask Mr. Chris Flaherty, who's in the gallery with us today, to come forward. I'd like to present you with the official certificate.
There you go, Chris.
Speech.
Just to clarify, just want to thank Chris very much for all your very many efforts and the very prestigious Alberta Water and Wastewater Award you received recently for Operator of the Year Award. And so just on behalf of our Taber Town Council, we thank you very much for your efforts and all the best of luck going forward as well. Thank you, Chris. All right, could I have a motion in that regard as well, please? Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council congratulates Mr. Chris Flaherty on his Operator of the Year award and thanks him for his contributions to the town's water and wastewater team.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Great, thank you. On to item 7.2, Taber Municipal Police Commission Policy Manual Review. Mr. Tebow.
I believe Mr. John McDonald is here to present to us.
All right, thank you. Mr. McDowell.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, councillors.
Good afternoon.
On behalf of the Police Commission, I'm really happy to be here today to submit to you for your review our successfully completed updated Police Commission Policy Manual Review. We discussed it at our last meeting, and it was passed to go on to review to the council, and I'd like to present that to you. I'm sure our representatives on the commission will speak to it, but I'm here to speak to it as well.
All right, thank you. It's a very well done, involved document, so thank you for all your efforts in that regard. Do our council reps have any Anything to add to that? By chance, Councillor Sorno?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome, Mr. McDonald. I took part in this year's policy review, and I think it went fairly smoothly. We just added a few necessary things that needed to be added in regards to the Alberta Police Commission policy changes also. We added some criminal background check requirements, some code of conduct policies. I think we also added, maybe perhaps Police Chief could also include anything that I forgot, but yeah, not too many. Oh, the Police Commission logo we had to add into there to the policy.
And the FOIP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
FOIP, okay. Got everything?
Right. All right. Councillor Firth?
I think Councillor Sorensen covered it, and she was on that committee, so she is much better versed in it than I am, so I will defer to her.
All right, fair enough. Any other questions arising? Councillor Rudd?
Well, I'd be prepared to make a motion right away, but not without comment first, and congratulating you on a great job that was done on that. I went through that document carefully and saw the additions, and just, it did my soul good to see them there, what was added in, because it's some of them are so vital to the operations and keeping the efficiency and nimbleness of the police service and the police commission supporting each other. And I thought it was a stellar job, and you know, there may be some challenges in application down the road, but that's too bad. You know, it looks like a real solid document ready for action, and congratulations on that. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make the motion that council approves the 2022 Taber Municipal Police Commission Policy Manual as presented.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. Item 7.3, Alberta Policing Standards Audits. Mr. Thibault.
We're going to allow Mr. McDonald to stand.
Well, we are very, very fortunate. Not only did our police go through an audit, and if you've ever been through an audit, they're not very nice to go through, and they're very intensive, but they have 152 standards. They were exceeding in all 152 standards. The recommendations, there were no recommendations to improve. That's how highly this team was prepared for this audit. At the commission meeting, we congratulated that. They asked, that made sure that I sent a letter to the police, congratulating them on their successful audit. But this is, for me, quite an honor to present this to you as well, because it tells you, the councillors, just how high a standard your police are. When you walk down the streets, they are prepared, and they are doing everything they possibly can to ensure that's the safety of this community. So I'd like to present that for your review as well.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Councillor Bickering?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Congratulations again. I'd just like to ask either yourself or Chief Abella, of the other municipal police agencies in Alberta, are you privy to any information that they are graded on, or how they fared in their audit?
Well, the chief may have more information than I do. I'm not quite sure if they share that information publicly, but I will say this, that for me, being police chair, the honor I have is that I'm proud of what this team has done. And I only accept this kind of praise because the team did the work. I'm just here at this time to present it to you. But I'll let Chief.
Thank you, sir. Your worship, members of council. The audit results are public documents, and different agencies go through different audits at different time through a 3-year cycle. I am aware that there are municipal police agencies and or First Nations police services in the province right now that are not standard compliant and are working with the Minister of Justice and Public Safety team to become standard compliant.
All right, thank you. Any other questions arising? Councillor Rudd?
Oh, there's no requirement for promotion on this, I see by the
Right.
request for decision, but again, going through the document, it's, it's thrilling reading for an old retired cop to go through it, and honestly, I made a note, and I wanted to bring this up in front of the council and to take back to your commission, is I made the note, this is what is possible when a service is adequately funded and staffed. And we can't lose sight of that, because that's the crumbling edge, if you will, of problems developing when there's insufficient dollars there to carry out the operations and insufficient staff. Then that's when you start having problems. So bravo for the effort of the town of Taber from top to bottom in making sure that the service is adequately funded and staffed. And good job. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the commission, thank you. But like I said, the team itself does the work. I'm just a pretty face in the corner, that's all.
All right, thank you. I'd just also like to reiterate, Mr. McDonald, thank you and congratulations as well. And congratulations to Chief Abella and the Taber Police Service team as well. We appreciate that very much. All right, moving on to item 7.4, capital purchase of next generation 911. Mr. Tebow.
Chief Abella is going to come and speak to this one.
All right, thank you, Chief Abella.
Again, Your Worship, as you're probably aware, in the past, there was a capital, in our capital plan, there was a request to fund the purchase of Next Gen 911, which is a requirement of the CRTC. We've gone through that investigation as an organization to determine which is the best solution for us. And we've come forth with this application to you. Under our procurement policy, there's a requirement for council to approve because it's over a certain threshold. And that's what's before you today. If someone does choose to look at the recommendation, the only thing that I would change out of it, as I was corrected just before the meeting by our learned Chief Financial Officer, is that it should say approved capital budget, not approved capital reserve fund. I guess that's important.
All right, yes, it is, especially from Mr. Orwell's perspective, absolutely.
Just for your information as well, we were advised by TELUS early on that it would cost about $60,000 per pod to implement this solution, and which took us to about that $240,000, $250,000 mark. That's the monies that were asked for by the police service for the capital fund, but I'm pleased to say that this application comes in at $160,000, so $90,000 less, a little bit more than $150,000, a little bit less than. Quite a bit less, actually, than what we had planned.
All right, thank you. Bonus. Councillor Beckering.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief Abella. I'm just wondering if in the proposed recommendation, whether the amount should be mentioned, Mr. Orwa? The amount of the cost of the next generation should be in the motion or not?
Well, I think it can still be fine the way it is because the budget has already been approved. It's part of the listing in the capital budget. And it's already been funded.
Yeah, thank you. I'll prepare to make a motion then, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
The council approves the next generation 911 solution from INET Public Safety, Inc. in accordance with the Town of Taber purchasing policy from the 2022 approved capital budget.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Councillor Brown.
With this, there's a $37,000 annual fee that will go on until the next generation comes out, correct?
There's definitely a licensing fee that accompanies most software per year, and that is, we will move forward with our operating budget each year for that, and we are funded from the provincial government through the 911 grant, now at about $240,000, I can't remember the exact amount, but to offset the cost of that yearly license fee.
So that's been budgeted in with the annual fee?
So for this one it is, for the first year, but when we move forward in operating, we will be including it in our licensing fee, in our licensing budget.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Do you have a motion on the table? Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes my, may I be excused?
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
On to item 7.5, proposed capital project 52nd and 40th Avenue Bulbul. Mr. Tebow.
Mr. Scheer is already front and center to discuss this one.
This is,
Right, thank
this
you,
is a
Mr.
good
Chair.
one, and this was a past council initiative and something they really wanted to bring forward. So here again, we turned it more not into maintenance, but into revitalization of the downtown area. And you can see we got funded a good 75%, which is excellent. Normally we're not allowed that much, but. And then under the funding agreement, we're allowed to stack, which is up to 100% of the project. So that's where we worked with Mr. Orwa, and we figured we could use some of that next year's Canada Community Building Fund, which was federal gas tax. And so the project is 100% funded. Within the project is a whole new bulb out for the 52nd Street and 48th Avenue, street lighting. There's a few murals, depending on costs and things like that, banners and holders for the banners. So it's a good downtown project. So we're just looking forward to council's discussion.
All right, thank you. Councilor McLean?
Well done. I just had a question about the murals. Yeah, so what is the idea for those?
I think that kind of should go through the Arts and Cultural Committee, but that's Chris's world, but that's Emily's, and they would probably bring some of those forward.
All right, thank you. Councilor Bruin?
Yes, with the funding on this, it looks much more attractive, but this will be the 9th time it's come before council.
Yeah.
And we've decided not to spend the money on these ball boats all 8.5 times. So, I think it's a lot of money to spend on something I'm not sure everyone in downtown really wants.
All right, thank you. Councilor Firth?
Thank you. Yes, well done. And I am also excited to hear about these murals and anything that's going to help revitalize our downtown. And I would be prepared to make a motion at this time.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
I move the council directs administration to add the 52nd Street and 48th Avenue bulb out project to the 2022 capital budget, with funds to come from the Canada Community Revitalization Fund in the amount of $413,739 and allocates $137,914 to come from the 2023 Canada Community Building Fund allocation. Council authorizes the mayor and CAO to sign the Canada Community Revitalization Fund agreement, and council directs administration to use paving stones as the walkway surface for the bulb out project.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Councilor Sorensen?
I was just gonna ask what's the lifespan of those bulb outs? We may have discussed that before.
We've discussed this before, and we've seen how there's a lot of de-icer, and it seems like the de-icer in front of the businesses is the worst part. The bulb outs aren't as bad. They're actually in pretty good shape. But normal lifespan of paving stone is anywhere from 25 to 40 years.
All right, thank you. We do have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, on to item 7.6, coffee with council. Mr. Thibault.
We'll have Ms. Megan Brennan come in and present.
All right, thank you. Ms. Brennan?
Good afternoon, council.
Good afternoon.
So I will be preaching to the choir for some of you and presenting something new to some of the rest of you. As you can see in your agenda item, Coffee with Council, there's been a request to have that brought forward again. And we've detailed the costing and administration's opinion on the initiative within that RFD. So I'm available for any questions that you might have. In administration's official opinion, we would say that this initiative has probably run its course. It was not well attended by the end of its iteration, and with the COVID-19 pandemic, not a single resident has asked administration anyways when Coffee with Council will return. So from that judgment, we would say that the public is ambivalent to it. However, it is council's initiative, so we leave you some alternatives to decide what you'd like to do with it.
All right, thank you. I can speak to some of that. Actually, for me, I was the one that asked for that to be on the agenda. It was actually by way of motion. I didn't remember the exact date that was by Councilor Tams to put it on hold until the restrictions are off, whatever date that was. But that was the only reason it was taken off the board for that particular usage. It was part of our strategic initiative as is indicated in the package. I've been asked by probably a dozen different people in the last couple months for if we're gonna reenact this or reinitiate this type format. There's times we might have had a couple people attend. Sometimes there are 10 or 12 people attend. It was never hugely attended. But I have to say personally, that was very well received for those that were in attendance. We had a lot of great items came up that ended up being agenda items that changed things quite considerably for whatever we weren't aware of previous. And that were some very good bits of information we received from the public at large in that regard. In some cases, there was definitely some venting going on, and we handled that accordingly. I think normally we had anywhere from 3 to 7 counselors attend, either the Thursday evening or the Friday morning, to try to cover all bases. So I don't know. To me, even if it's just one person that attends, that's one is important as is 101 if they're so choosing to attend. So to me, it's been a very effective, very efficient program and a way to get back to the community. Part of our strategic initiative, initially, as I said, that we agreed to last council and was definitely very well received by the public that did participate and information that came out of it as a result. So I look forward to any other comments or questions that come out. Councillor Beckering?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended many of those coffee meetings. And being in the public eye 2 days a week at Home Hardware, I speak to a lot of people, and not once has anyone asked me, when are you going to have coffee and cookies again, Garth? So I don't know. I'm not too excited about it, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor Frew.
I have to say I was surprised when you said 12 people asked you, because I didn't think 12 people total had attended them. Yes, you're right. Sometimes they were well attended, but I think more often than not, not as much. And I really think that, especially now, council is fairly accessible. I mean, all of our email addresses are available. I think some of us have Facebook pages. There's you can always call and leave a voicemail. Like, I think if people would like to get in touch with us, that is a possibility. But if there are people that are really just dying to have coffee with council, I would suggest it on a quarterly basis and to utilize the library because of the cost savings, and also to alleviate the strain on administration having to work outside of normal hours. If we were going to hold that, I would be willing to assist with bringing the refreshments, because I don't think it's fair that administration has to be doing that outside of their normal work hours. So that's my thoughts.
All right, thank you. Councillor Brown?
I'd agree with Councillor Firth there, but the only addition I'd say, I'd stick with the Parkside Manor. It's a little more ease of access there, and I'd like to support them with their rental. So, but I think 4 times a year is sufficient. It's not always well attended. Like the mayor said, there is some bring good topics brought up at the sessions, and sometimes it's just coffee. So, but it is good to keep in touch with the public. I'd go for 4 times a year.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Rudd?
I'd support the quarterly, and the best approach that I've found is just those moments that happen just as you're in a store or at a gas pump or someplace. You make the contact, and they're valuable as well. But if we were going to formalize it, self-promotion is always really hard to do, and the ambivalence is people just, it's apathy is probably more accurate, and so I wouldn't want to see it done anymore quarterly just because of that.
All right, thank you, Councillor Swanson.
I'd be interested in also initiating participation by businesses also, so I'm not sure how we could direct administration to reach out to them too, but I feel that there might be some benefits in reaching out to the business community also.
All right, thank you. Did you have a direct question to administration in that regard, or?
Is it?
I would say that the motions that are up there don't exclude businesses. They're not saying that it has to be just a personal anybody, so but that would be including businesses if they would want to show up at that location. There's nothing stopping them. It's for the general public at large.
All right, thank you, Councillor Bruin.
I just have to say, we have had business come and discuss things there, so it is open to everyone. And of course, we encourage the businesses, but I don't think we'd have to reach out specifically to just businesses either.
No, I just wanted to include them. I'm not sure how it's advertised or how,
Everybody's welcome.
welcome
And
everyone.
if Councillor Firth has volunteered to bring the refreshments and clean up afterwards, I think it's a no-brainer.
All right, someone prepared to make a motion? I think it was Parkside. Councillor Firth?
Sure, I'll make a motion. Float this out there, see if everybody agrees. I move that council conducts coffee with council quarterly at the library and direct administration to make all necessary arrangements during regular working hours only.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bruin?
I'd support it at Parkside Manor, not specifically the library.
Is that a friendly amendment, Councillor Bruin?
If I may make one.
I would accept. I would accept that friendly amendment.
All right, thank you. Councillor Sorensen?
I think Councillor Rudd made a good suggestion of splitting it up and having it 2 at the library, 2 at Parkside Manor.
Councillor Rudd, would you like to amend the friendly amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, sure, I would do that. It was just something that fell in my mouth, but I think it has merit.
Sure. I think that sounds like a great compromise.
Okay, all right. Friendly amendment by 2 on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? All right, carried. Thank you. All right, on to item 7.7, employee computer purchase plan policy. Mr. Tebow.
I believe Mr. Orwa is going to come speak to us about this one.
All right, thank you. Mr. Orwa.
Thank you again, members of council. I think the geek is on timeout today, but I'll take this one on his behalf. Now, before you is the employee computer purchase plan policy CS IT2. So this is a policy that has been in existence since 2011 and is really working well for everybody within the organization. And it was just due for review. It's a 3-year policy and administration is not recommending any changes at this time.
All right, thank you. Councillor Sorensen.
Since my laptop's like 10 or 12 years old, I was just wondering why it's frequently, or it's as frequent as even 2 years, every 2 years, purchase of computers.
You mean in terms of purchase or in terms of?
Item 2.3, it says each eligible employee or council member can apply for the employee computer purchase plan no more frequently than once every 2 years.
I think this is why this policy is before council. If at all there's anything that you see out there that you think needs to be changed, then we can accommodate.
Is that just your experience though, that things in your department need to be updated that frequently?
Not really. I think once every 2 years sounds reasonable.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tebow.
I'll just chime in and suggest that I had spoken with some IT folks, and industry standard is somewhere between 2 to 5 years for replacement. That doesn't sound old for the average person at home, because my laptop is much older than that as well. But that is industry standard, somewhere between there.
Thank you. Mr. Scheer had some comments also.
Yeah, I think this has to do with more to the financing side, to say this is the loan over 2 years, and that's why it's only over 2 years. And I think that's what it's referring to.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, thank you, Councillor Firth.
No, but I just want to make sure that she was asking on the technology side and not the purchase side. So I just wanted to make it very clear there.
Okay.
Because if it's the technology side, then 2 years is reasonable. But again, what Mr. Shi has just mentioned there is the duration of payback.
Councillor Firth?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, this is for purchase of personal computers at home. So this is not funded by the town in any way. This is funded by the employee or the council member who is purchasing the computer. Is that correct?
Yeah, so let me just explain there a little bit. So what happens here is we don't just want to be technologically savvy ourselves. We want to expand everything to the entire town. So anybody who wants to purchase any computer can come forward. I want this kind of computer. And then what we do is we purchase for them in advance. Then we make some, the payment reasonable for them over time, so that the financial impact is not felt by those individuals.
All right,
But
thank
you can
you.
go for anything you want.
Councillor Broom?
This is more taking advantage of a bulk buy and the power of the town being able to buy electronics, if I'm correct. We still, if a member wants to buy a computer, they have to pay for it. It's just, we're getting a better price because town buys a lot of electronics.
That would be one. Number two, the other part of it is make sure that, not everybody can afford maybe a 3,000 or 4,000 computer at a go. So the town purchases for you in advance, and then we give you a reasonable payment to pay back to the town.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Someone prepared to make a motion, Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be prepared to make that motion. I move the council approves the employee computer purchase plan policy CS-IT-2 as presented.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.8, acceptable use of information technology. Mr. Tebow.
Mr. Orwell will give us this presentation as well.
Again, the same thing applies to this policy CS-IT-6. Again, this is another one that is due for review, and administration again is not recommending any changes at this time. And again, this is also one of the policies that has been used entirely by the TABOR team, and it's been very effective. We've not been seeing anybody abusing this policy. And normally the reference I give to this policy is, if you look at the policy itself, you look at 2.5, that is one area that I think these guys really watch quite a bit to make sure that, people don't just, use some of these IT resources inappropriately. And I think things have been working well.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor McLean?
I'm prepared to make a motion, Mr.
Right.
Mayor. I move that council adopts the acceptable use of information technology resources policy CS-IT-6 as presented.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.9, Resignation Arts and Heritage Committee. Mr. Tebow.
I believe Mrs. Brennan is speaking on this one as well. Is that correct? Or is it going to be? Can you speak to it, Carrie? Thank you.
Afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon.
We've received a resignation from the Arts and Heritage Committee from Mr. Beebe. So his letter for his reasons for resigning are attached to your package. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make that motion? Councillor McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council accepts the resignation of Mr. Joshua Beebe from the Arts and Heritage Committee with regret, and council wishes Mr. Beebe the best in his future endeavors.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Now, we do have dinner available tonight. Just looking for council's input. We do have a delegation slated for 5 o'clock. Would you rather go through that, get through that, and or have dinner after, or take a break now? All right, okay. We're all good with that? Okay, carry on. Item 7.10, correspondence, Town of Fox Creek, increasing utility fees. Mr. Tebow.
So I believe this one was brought forward by yourself, Mr. Mayor, to provide some support for this particular letter. I think it was you who brought it forward.
I think it came to all of us, there was some discussion between myself and Councillor Sorensen, actually. But I believe it went to every member, right? So, yeah, that was what the ask was about. And just for some council consideration, Councillor Beckert.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I read the documentation, and this is what I call a motherhood and apple pie kind of issue. How can you be opposed to it? So I'll make a motion.
All right, very well.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that council directs administration to draft a letter to the Alberta Utilities Commission regarding the increasing utility fees for Alberta, similar to the letter received from the town of Fox Creek, and authorizes the mayor to sign the letter.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? Oh, Councilor Rudd, you had a question?
Just to support Councilor Beckering, Mr. Mayor, if it ain't said, it ain't so. So we need to be on the record. I support that.
Absolutely, yeah, that's not an unreasonable request. So we do have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. Item 711, busking. Mr. Tebow.
I believe Emily Himbro is going to come and discuss for us.
All right, thank you. Emily?
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
As per council request, busking has been part of town-run events for all of the 2021 season to gauge the community and performer interest. For 2021, we only had 5 to 6 regular buskers, and we had 2 other buskers that came once each. At the Art and Heritage Committee's last meeting, there was an extensive conversation around the town supplying equipment for buskers. So I just wanted to highlight the reason why that was not put forward in our recommendation to council. We, as administration, had a discussion following the Art and Heritage Committee meeting and decided that it should not be the financial burden or responsibility for the town to provide any equipment to buskers. That should be on the buskers themselves. And yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you. Councilor Broom?
Could you explain to me exactly what busking is?
So the buskers that we had at most of our, well, at all of our events were of the musical capacity, so they all played instruments and sang. There's buskers that can eat fire or juggle or dance or magic or things like that.
So is it in the same, is it panhandling, like, are they?
Yeah, it's a street performer. It's different than panhandling in a sense that some buskers don't ask for money. They're not trying to sell anything. They're just performing just to show.
And we're saying only at certain events, or we'll allow it anytime someone wants to busk? They can busk.
Currently, we were having them at our town events. If they want to busk anywhere else, they would have to put a special event application forward, which would be then approved by our CAO. But we haven't had, that I know of, any buskers requesting to do anything other than our town events so far.
Haven't seen a lot of buskers.
No. If you go to bigger cities, there tends to be some. So like if you go to Vegas, there's lots down the streets painted or performing or whichever, but town doesn't have that many.
All right, thank you. Councilor Shortson?
Hi, Emily. So currently, we do not have a policy or procedure for busking right now.
We do not.
And currently, the powers that be remain in Mr. Tebow's favor of allowing it.
We do.
I would like to know his opinion on that.
I'm not sure I've got a real strong opinion on that. However, at our town events, I would say that it's been well received. I haven't seen them at the town events, but in talks with I attended the Arts and Heritage Committee meetings previously when I first came on board, and one of the folks there had talked about busking and that it seemed to be well received at the town events. I'm certainly not opposed to approving it on a case-by-case basis with other scenarios if council thinks that's something that they'd like to see around town. So I'm fine with busking.
All right, thank you. Councilor Rudd?
Yeah, you answered the one question, Emily, and thanks, Mr. Mayor, about how many requests we get. We don't get a lot of people asking to coming in and taking out a busking license or anything. So the dividing line then, if you're busking and put a hat down versus just busking without a hat down, are they considered crossing the line into panhandling?
I believe so. That's how I interpret it, is that as soon as you put a hat down or your guitar case open and you're looking for money, then it turns into kind of the panhandling, but it's also busking. But if you're not, then you're just busking, and it's pretty simple.
Yeah. So what would be the point If you're, but I don't see an issue with throwing your hat down and being out there, but that's why maybe we need some clarity in a bylaw to manage that, to put some definitions to it and make sure that it's clear. Because I think it adds to the community. You know, I've traveled in other countries and it's a feature on the street, and hats out. I don't know what kind of legislation is behind it, but it's often quite refreshing to see that going on in communities, and just adds to the spirit of things. So
Yeah,
I would support Mr. Mayor
All right.
to look into creating a bylaw so we get that clarified.
I think Emily can clarify this to confirm, but basically it was designed and/or came through the Arts and Heritage, right, initially from some of the players, the guitar players, et cetera, asking for this. And in fact, I think even one of the members of the board also suggested that was a good idea. So a year trial, wasn't it? Initially, it was kind of the
It was, yes.
right. And yeah, so if somebody wants to throw in $1 or $2 or whatever, going by as they're singing. That's what it's about, and appreciating that they're not forced to, and they're not asking per se. It's just kind of that understanding, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think it was problematic. I saw it going on occasionally, the farmers market, things like that. It wasn't a problem, and it seemed to be well received all the way around. Councilor Brown?
Well, I think my question's really been answered, but there has to be a line between busking and panhandling. Like, I don't know where you draw that line.
Yeah, that would be a discussion that I would prefer if we were to add it to a bylaw to have with our chief of police and his staff to help us draw a clear line to create that difference so that we know. But currently, yeah, it's
Yeah,
hard to,
because
it's
if I
hard to
could
define
hold
the
a tune, I could go busking.
difference. Exactly.
But then there is no business license required to busk.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilor Sorensen?
Just, Mr. Mayor, I'd be prepared to make a motion.
All right.
I'd be prepared to make a motion that council directs administration to create a policy and procedure to allow for busking, as well as update the community standards and business license bylaw to reflect this.
All right, thank you. Councilor Firth, you had a question also?
No, I was just going to offer to make the motion and just mention that I am in favor of anything that fosters opportunities for art and performance in our community, so I'm in favor of this.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? Mr. Tebow?
You had mentioned a policy and procedure. I believe it's something we would want to address through a bylaw. Was that your intention? Okay. Yeah, you mentioned policy and procedure. I didn't hear the word bylaw
Right.
unless I missed
That's right,
it.
yeah, I think so, yeah. So I guess just to confirm, you're actually meaning the bylaw format, Councilor Sorensen?
That's the reason the motion.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Van Ham?
Yeah, so it was alternative number 1, which was that council directs administration to create a policy and procedure to allow for busking, as well as update the community standards and business license bylaw to reflect this.
Okay,
So
Ms.
I'm
Van
not
Ham?
sure if
Sorry, I might have missed bylaw to begin
Okay.
with.
Ms. Van Ham, that's accurate, we're good?
Yes, that is the accurate motion that I have recorded from
Okay,
Councilor Swanson.
perfect, thank you. Councilor Brown?
In that, would that then mean that the Taber Police would have some say and recommendation in that?
Absolutely. They are the controllers of the community
Buskers.
standards bylaw. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Firth?
Would that also mean that busking would continue to be allowed at town events?
Yes.
Into that, okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you. Once again, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 712, Twinning Research Project. Mr. Tebow?
This is the one that Ms. Brennan was going to be speaking to, not the last one. Sorry.
Thought you were rid of me, but I'm back. Luckily, this time I'm not asking you for anything. With council moving forward with sending the mayor and a member of administration over to SAEA and with the ball rolling on potential twinning with the same, administration wanted to do its due diligence for council and do a little bit of research on the differences with twinning, sister cities, and to also really research if any of the twinning relationships that we could find in Canada had any sort of resource sharing, which is something that the county government of Saia did make mention of. So you'll see the report and the people that did get back to us and the ones that we did reach out to. As of this time and through our research, not a single one of the groups that we reached out to had a resource sharing portion of their twinning relationships. Most of them focused on twinning or friendship or cultural exchanges. Some talked about economic exchanges, but there was nothing of meat, if you will, to those. So we're just providing this for council's information. As the discussions continue, we imagine that more will come in the coming months and years.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? See none whatsoever, all right. And no motion required, or Councillor Firth?
I was just going to say that I would be in favor of a similar agreement as to what we have with Nodagawa, Japan, which I think is just a cultural friendly type of twinning situation. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, and no motion required once again. So moving on to item 713, economic review. Mr. Thibault.
Mr. Orwa is going to speak to this, and I believe, John, we have someone electronically.
So, sorry, I'll not speak to this one here, but I'll pass it over to my colleagues out in Calgary here. These are the Wood Gandhi guys. So normally we have this kind of economic outlook around this time to give council a very, more of a macro sense or a bird's eye view of where we are within the economy as we approach the budgeting and mill rates. So it will be a quick and short one, and then probably might ask them some questions if you do have. Are they on the line?
John, we're on the line.
Okay, so I'll hand this one over to you, please, James and Chahal. Maybe just a quick introduction, and I can see is James joining us, or is there? Okay, proceed.
Yeah, he's on as well.
Proceed.
Char, can you see my screen? I don't think it's showing up. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us here this evening. We want to give a quick introduction just in terms of who we are, what we do for the town. So my name's James Hobson. I'm joined with Char Chahal. We're the Hobson Chahal Advisory Group at CIBC Wood Gundy. So we would be the only team at Wood Gundy that only does institutional investment management. So right now we work with 55 municipalities. Most of them are in Alberta. And other public sector institutions with similar goals to the town. We have, like I said, an institutional focus. We manage close to $3 billion, and we're essentially responsible for creating customized investment solutions that are tailored specifically to meet the unique needs of town of Taber. So I'll walk you through these. These are sort of the four key pillars of municipal investment management. Obviously, everything we do is fully compliant with the Municipal Government Act. Number one is preservation of capital. So making sure we're dealing with tax dollars. So making sure that everything is principal guaranteed. All the investments we buy always have a principal guarantee attached to them. Number two is risk mitigation. So making sure we're diversified across the various asset classes, not just between across the various banks, but also staggered in terms of the maturities. Number three is return on investment. So making sure that once we're in that safe box, how do we maximize the rate of return we can, subject to the constraints that we have under the MGA. So how do we generate as much cash flow as we possibly can, and how do we protect the reserve funds from the eroding effects of inflation, which we'll get into in a minute here, but very, very important in the current environment. Last but not least is liquidity needs. So making sure that the portfolio is structured in a way that when you need the funds, we have them ready. So everything we buy is fully liquid, and we can get the funds back whenever the town requires. So jumping into an economic update, it's been a pretty swift recovery so far. So this just shows you on the left there, real Canadian GDP. It shows you how sharp and short that recession was that we had. The dark gray line there on the left is the COVID-19 recession. And as you can see, we're actually at the point where we're finally back above that pre-recession growth trend. And it shows you kind of graphed against the financial crisis, that's the red line, and the early 1990s recession. And you can just see kind of how short and sharp of a recession it was. On the right there is Canadian employment numbers. So again, similar story. We saw a dramatic drawdown in jobs numbers, but we've bounced back and we're actually back above that pre-pandemic trend line. So this is all positive for Alberta. We get a lot of questions on Russia, just given that it's kind of dominating the news media right now. So just to illustrate that Russia is not exactly an economic powerhouse. When we look at actually their total GDP compared to other nations in the world, Russia's pretty small component of the global GDP numbers. So especially when you compare it to US, China, our G7 peers, Russia's a relatively small economic powerhouse, so to speak. So when we look at the geopolitical tensions, Russia is not so much going to have that big of an impact that you might think just based on the news that we're hearing. But they are a big player in energy. So this doesn't impact us so much in Alberta, obviously, because we're energy independent. However, for the European Union, it's a much bigger deal. So Germany, for example, takes about 40% of its oil and gas directly from Russia. So when you're seeing all this geopolitical tension, it's really impacting Europe much more than it is us. You can see Canada there. There's no bar at all because we make our own oil, so we're not so dependent on Russia. Now, I'm sure many of you are aware already that the Bank of Canada has entered a rate hiking cycle. They've hiked interest rates once, and we expect them to raise rates at least another 4 times this year, and then a couple of times more next year. Obviously, this is in response to very elevated inflation. Now, I mentioned earlier we work with 55 municipalities. The biggest concern we're seeing is the cost of everything is going up, the cost of your capital projects. We're seeing supply chain bottlenecks. It takes longer to get things done, and wage inflation as well. For the first time in a long time, we're having to compete with private sector to attract and retain the best talent. So last week, the U.S. printed their highest inflation number in 40 years. It was 7.9%, so extremely elevated inflation year over year. Now, in Canada, we're going to fare a little bit better. We're forecasting inflation this year around 4%, but that's still double what the Bank of Canada's target of 2% is. So it's really, really important in this environment to make sure that we're optimizing our mix between cash, investing, and borrowing. Administration has been fantastic in terms of making sure everything is optimized and making sure that our purchasing power is being retained in this environment. Now, just to break it down by the numbers, there's a lot of numbers on this chart here, but this basically shows you real GDP on the left there. For the first time in about 5 years, we're presenting a positive economic outlook. So for Alberta, obviously high energy prices is a positive for our province. We're forecasting 4.3% growth versus a national average of 3.6. So we're going to grow faster by far than any other province in Canada this year and next year. Next year growing at around 3.6 versus a national average of 2.8. Additionally, like on the inflation side, on the far right, it shows you the inflation numbers broken down by province, 4% for Alberta versus national average of 4.5, and then kind of taming down closer to that central bank target rate of 2% going into next year. Now, if you can take anything from this presentation, it would be this slide. This shows you the forecast for GDP for the provinces versus the original provincial forecast. On the left there is Alberta. You can see in 2019 when they did the forecast, oil prices were much, much lower. And now we're predicting the biggest budget beat of any province in Canada. So again, for the first time in a long time, things are looking much, much better in terms of economic growth for our province.
Awesome. Thanks, James. So what I'm going to do now is kind of talk a little bit about why the Alberta's good budget's going to be beating, like Alberta's going to see the biggest budget. If we kind of take a step back to 2019 when the province put their budget together, if we actually look at what was in that budget, $70 to $72 oil was kind of their break even to essentially getting to that surplus area within the budget. And $80 to $85 oil was their kind of pie in the sky, top upper bound number of the price of oil. Well, depending on the day or week you look at it, oil could be 130, 100, or as of today, $95. All of this to say that we are well and above and beyond where the original forecast was, the upper bound original forecast was for Alberta. So we haven't done a positive economic update here in Alberta in over half a decade. So we are. It's a good news story for us here in Alberta. The problem with commodities, yes, it is a positive news story for us in Alberta. Higher government revenues, higher provincial revenues, higher corporate tax dollars, higher employment numbers. However, it's always a two-sided coin, double-sided coin there. You're always double-sided sword, because what you're always going to be playing with is higher commodities equals higher input prices equals higher inflation, which goes back to what James is kind of saying. So higher inflation is not necessarily a good thing, which is exactly why that the Canada and the US, as James kind of alluded to, has entered this rate hiking cycle where interest rates have come up. And the primary reason that they're going to be entering this interest rate hiking cycle is because they want to stem inflation. So if we actually look at where our economists are currently forecasting the overnight, so the Bank of Canada's overnight rate to be is, so 2 weeks ago, they did their first hike to 0.5. We anticipate them doing 4 more rate hikes before the end of the year to get us to 1.5, and then topping out near that 1.75 mark by the end of next year. The U.S. Fed's being a little bit more aggressive, getting to about 1.875 by the end of next year. So both are going to be aggressive in their rate hike cycles, Canada being a little bit less. And the question we always get is a rate hike cycle going to stem inflation, particularly here in Canada? And the reason we think that answer is yes, it's twofold. One is if we actually take a look at the impact of the overnight rate or the Fed funds rate, this is the actual rate that the Bank of Canada rate on the right-hand side there, and versus the effective rate. The effective rate is the actual rate that us as consumers pay on debt, mortgages, lines of credit, things like that. If we actually look at how responsive or how sensitive the US and Canada are in terms of every time the Bank of Canada or the Feds raise their interest rates, what happens to the actual effective interest rate that we pay on debt? On the left-hand side there, you can see that in the US, every time that the Feds hike rates, the effective interest rate doesn't move as much as it does in Canada on the right-hand side there. So what that tells us is our effective rate is significantly more sensitive than it is in the States. So that's why we think that we're going to be a little bit less aggressive in terms of what the US is going to do. And the second key piece here is once we do raise rates, what you're looking at on the left-hand side here is every 1% increase on the effective rates, the actual rate we pay in debt, the impact that it's going to have on consumer spending. So every 1% increase in the effective rate is a 2% impact on consumer spending. A direct impact on consumer spending is a direct impact on a direct fight against inflation. So this is why we kind of see that as we go into this rate hiking cycle, inflation should start to come back down with the long-term target going back near that long-term policy rate of 2%. Now, a presentation from our team would not be complete without a yield curve. A yield curve just shows the rate of return we would get for the amount of time we look to borrow or invest. The bottom line there, the green line, is the Government of Canada. The red line would be provincial issuers. The red line would be financial institutions. What this is essentially showing us is that the bond market or the yield curve is already adjusted for a rate hike cycle. Another way of showing that for specifically for the town and how that actually specifically impacts you guys is James kind of touched on it, and your administration has been great to get that balance between short and long-term strike really well. What this is actually showing us is that the investment market is already adjusted for this. So for the town of Taber, what this actually means is investment revenues and expected returns are actually going to start to go significantly higher. And this not only for the town, but for us personally as well. Long gone are the days where earning like 1% on a GIC was like a good thing. But if you could find that on a 1-year GIC, we've actually started to see the rates start to pick up. So in summary, in this quick presentation, Alberta's going to be doing really well. Inflation is the numbers to watch, and the expected rate of return for the town is going to go up over the next coming years as we redeploy capital back into the portfolio. With that, we wanted to keep this brief for you guys today, so we actually spent a little bit more time on questions if you guys had them.
All right, thank you so much for your presentation. Any questions arising? No questions whatsoever. All right, that makes it easy. Well, thank you again, gentlemen. Appreciate your information very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just again to clarify, no motion required, Mr. Thibault, right?
No motion required.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 714, standing item council requests. Mr. Thibault.
So back to our standing items list. Happy to present that 4 out of our 6 were looked after with tonight's agenda. We do still have 8-2022, which was sort of a monitoring over on 56, which has yet to come to pass.
If I just speak to that one, Mr. Thibault, actually first.
Sure.
I believe that information was sent out a while back. We all received information from Mr. Sawatsky related to that first item for some additional concerns or requests related to some damage to vehicle windows in that same area. Looking for some other council input or suggestions and or discussion. Councillor Rudd.
No, I think, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Pretty clear that's an insurance issue. It's probably a byproduct, but an anomaly byproduct of the wind blowing across there. It's just, you can't connect that dot to say this incident, the lack of germination caused my window to break. It's a pretty big stretch to make that. And that's why we have insurance. But I do support him in his frustration for that. But the town is not responsible, in my view.
All right, thank you. Just to clarify, either Mr. Thibault or Mr. Scheer, was there not some discussion with this Mr. Sawatsky related to that in the past about that particular concern?
Yes, there was. There again, our initial talks with Mr. Sawatsky was to contact your insurance. Go through your insurance, and if they feel there's a claim against the town, then they should make that claim. But always our first contact is insurance, and that's where he needs to go as far as administration is concerned.
All right, thank you. And any update to this stage as far as how things are looking over there related to that germination?
I was out there the other day. Everything looks pretty green. It's coming up quite well. But
okay.
We'll bring that back in May as per the motion, and we can review that.
All right, thank you. Councillor Broom?
I'd just like to agree with Mr. Scheer. It does look quite green out there. It's just a couple little spots that maybe if we threw some seed out, it'd be good. But there's actually really good catch there. Looks good.
Coming along better than last year, quite a bit.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
you can see the seed rows quite clearly, and we're going to have a problem with mowing it now.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, anything else on the list you want to discuss? Standing items and or any other individual standing items by any council member? Councillor Brown. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've had one specific business call me about bylaw enforcement. He sees multiple infractions, and seems that unless a complaint is made, the bylaw doesn't get involved. Is it our policy for no enforcement unless there is a complaint, or is the bylaw patrolling looking for some obvious issues?
You directed that to Mr. Tebow?
Yes, sure.
All right, Mr. Tebow.
Mr. Tebow doesn't want to speak on behalf of the police service. However, I'm aware that with conversations I've had with Chief Abella, and the bylaw officers have discretionary powers, so they do have the ability to initiate something or to not initiate something. I don't know if we're a complaint-based organization or a combination thereof. I'm thinking from what I hear, we're a combination thereof, and a complaint coming the chief's way is always welcome for him to send bylaw services out. I know of an incident just recently where a complaint was raised, and bylaw did go out and act on that because of the complaint. So it's not a negative thing to get a complaint. Chief Abella is quite willing to deal with anything that comes his way.
All right, thank you, Councillor Beckman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Mr. Tebow. This should be passed on to the Table Police Service for their action on their part. No need to discuss it.
Thank you, Councillor Brun.
My follow-up, I was still discussing it. Just that I've seen the same infraction over and over, and it seems there's nothing happening there.
Just to clarify, did you say what infraction that was?
Well, trucks parking, blocking the business frontage, and making, turning dangerous for any people that's visiting his business. But there are other numerous things that it's obvious, but it just doesn't seem to be addressed. On that point, our empty lot there on Cherry and Main, I see we have a lot of vehicles parked there. Have we come to an understanding with that company about parking there? To Mr. Tebow.
I haven't had direct contact with them at this point. I have the request written down, but I haven't had the conversation. I hadn't grabbed enough background yet to have a competent conversation about that lot.
Right, thank you, Councillor Schwarzen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think to just add a comment, if there's no complaints, then perhaps there's no record keeping as to, stats of how many infractions there are. So I would suggest that people do, if there is a problem or issue, for them to contact the Taber Police Department so that they can deal with it in a timely manner.
All right, thank you, Councillor Bruin.
I agree with what Councillor Sorensen says somewhat, but I think if there's an obvious infraction, we should be acting on it. Not because a lot of people don't like to speak out against their neighbors or an action they see, but if bylaw drives by the same spot every day and sees an infraction, they should be acting on it.
All right, thank you. I think that's the case in any law enforcement scenario of discretion as well, but they do certainly have that power. I know Councillor Rudd and Councillor Becker can also attest to that as far as that goes, myself and that experience in the past. But to answer your question, if they see an infraction, they should be following up on it. They do have that option. They don't have to wait for a complaint. Councillor Rudd?
Yeah, just wondering, this whole notion of, and I appreciate people come up to us and say things to us, and what do we do with them? And, I don't know that this needs to be council business of somebody parking or somebody speeding or such. Those people need to be told what to do, and it's very simple what to do, and that's to make the call. Bylaw, maybe if you hear enough, then and I was hearing enough, the bylaw wasn't doing their job, I would know what to do with that as well. And go in there. And that, and that brings me to the point of our, it was raised before about this re-examining the speed zone in front of Ace Place. It occurred to me, and maybe should have said so at the time, but I mean, Ace Place is a bona fide place of education, and the traffic committee recognized that by directing that the appropriate signs be put in there that should be in there. And thirdly, people that users of the road have an obligation to follow the rules of the road and be in compliance with the law. and yet it ends up, you know, that's all just natural progression of things that take place out in the world, and yet they're here at the table. So, you know, I don't know, maybe we need to rethink on that for, you know, individually to, when we get a complaint like that, just tell them, go to the police. How'd you like me to go to the police? I'll take it in there, you know, and do that rather than bring it in here unless something becomes a huge problem. You know, it seems like maybe this isn't the proper venue. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other individual standing council item requests? All right, seeing that and nothing else specific, I don't believe requires a motion. Mr. Tebow, correct?
No motions.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll move on to our delegations. Item 8.1, Tabor Motorcycle Association. Mr. Tebow.
I don't know the delegation, but I believe she's here. Is it Shelley? Is that your name? So come on up to the front, press the microphone. You can stand, you can sit. And did you want me to bring the presentation up on, or anything specific up on screen? You can just let me know.
Good afternoon, Shelley.
Good afternoon. My name's Shelley Cauldron. I'm from the Tabor Motorcycle Association, not the microphone. And I'm here to present, as you see on screen, a request for support to put power out at the track. We've been going since, I believe, 2004 we started the Motorcycle Association, and we have not had power out there. We've had generators running and stuff when we have our races and stuff, and this year the MD gave us a $5,000 donation to help us offset the costs. So I do have the estimate would be $11,005.67. So it would cost the TMA, which is nonprofit, $6,005.67 to put the power in. And we were just wondering if the town would be willing to help us with some of the cost for the power to go out there, because it is a big expenditure and it would be nice to have power.
All right, thank you. Councilor Beckert?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Mrs. Cauldron, how are you?
Good.
How long have you been president of the Tabor Motorcycle Association, Shelley?
This is my this is my fourth year.
So I know you put a lot of time and effort into this association, do you not?
I
A lot of
do.
volunteer labor. Could you just give us a little bit on a briefing on how many people are involved in the volunteer side and how much time you spend it approximately, Shelley?
Okay. So we start our meetings in January. So we have a meeting every month. We do our yearly annual elections, which apparently we just get the same people in there as it goes, but it's all good. My son was president. He left to move to Fort McMurray so that he could get out. So he was 8 years as president. So now Mom took over for my grandkids, my kids, my husband. They all ride, and it's a fun sport. And we have last year I think we had 250 people come to our race in June, and we had probably 30 people constantly out there helping pick rocks, fix the track, doing all the things that need to be done to get ready for a race, to keep everything moving, flowing smoothly and stuff. So we probably have 30 people right now that came to our AGM this year. Not last year, but the 2 years before, we had 6. So it's really growing. I'm amazed at how many people are willing and coming out now. So we have people from Foremost, Lethbridge, Raymond, they all come, they all help. So it's just nice to have power out there, and eventually, if we would like to keep spreading out there and maybe do some camping spots and stuff.
Right, all right, thank you. Councillor McLean?
I just have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How many people do you have to pay to use the track?
Yes.
And so how many, do you have to have like a membership to use it?
So we have a day membership. So if you decide to go out on a Saturday, we have keys at the co-op gas station, and you go sign a waiver. You pay your $20. You go ride. Whoops! You go ride for the day, and then you take your key back to co-op. So that's how we. And some weekends we get 30, 40 riders in a weekend. So it adds up, but. There's always lots of costs associated too.
Can I ask one follow-up question? And then how many races do you have throughout the year?
We just have one race.
Oh, okay.
And we have a practice night on Tuesday, so it's not considered wheel-to-wheel competition, but I started that 5 years ago, and every Tuesday night we have a get-together. At the end of September, middle of September, we have a prize trophy night and stuff, just keeping points from the actual practices that we have.
All right, thank you. Councillor Firth?
Thank you. I am in favor of supporting this. Just, I think you're right, it would be nice to have power out there. I've been out to your facility, not as a rider, because that is way out of my skill set, but it's a nice facility and we're lucky to have it so close to town. I was just curious, have you guys investigated any further grant funding through any other?
I just did the MD, and getting the approval also from council. I'm not sure if we needed it, or because I do have approval from the MD, but it's town property, so I'm just making sure all my ducks are kind of in room.
Thank you.
All right.
But we'd like to expand too, because we are doing, we need water out there, so we need to find a source to get water out there too. So that's going to be another expense.
The next thing.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Councillor Rowe?
I think you should hit the MD up for water. But
I was told to hit the town up for water, but
we'll argue
it's not very good.
We'll argue about that, because I think the shooting range wants water too. So
perfect.
That's a further discussion later.
Yeah.
But really, the last couple of years, I've really watched your track there and how busy it is. Your events, they bring in a lot of people into this area, and you have a very well-maintained track, and it's spoken very highly of for people that do come down and ride on it. So I would like to make a motion at this time that Council supports Taber Motorcycle Association request for the installation of power to the motocross track located on town-owned leased land, and that town authorize the amount of $6,007.67 to be taken out of the 2022 council discretionary fund.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Great, thank you, Shelley.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, thank you. Just one other thing in the open session, meeting inquiries, Mr. Tebow?
None that we're aware of.
None whatsoever. All right. If I could just ask to take a 30-minute break and move back into closed session upon our return. Thank you. Motion on the table, Councillor Beckering, thank you. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Great, thank you. All right, motion on the table, all in favor? Carried unanimously. One door open required. All right, and item 10.1, Joanne, that's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make a motion that council request administration to bring back the bylaw with a reversal order for adoption of the agenda and public hearings.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? Councillor Beckering?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity's sake, could we put in procedural bylaw as opposed to the bylaw friendly amendment?
Yeah, I could say procedural bylaw 14-2021.
All right.
Thank you.
Friendly amendment, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Just a motion to close the meeting. Counselor Firth. Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Great. Thank you.